Well, hello, my friends. Today I want to talk to you about sexual orientation and gender identity. Sexuality and gender identity are distinct but related aspects of a person's identity. Now, gender identity refer to one's internal sense of being male, female, or another gender, while sexual orientation describes the pattern of emotional, romantic, and/or sexual attraction to others. These concepts are not always aligned and can be fluid. Now, when we talk about gender identity, okay, the definition says that gender identity is a person's internal, deeply felt sense of being male, female, both, neither, or somewhere else along the gender spectrum. Okay, we also have the not dependent on sex assigned at birth. Gender identity can be the same or different from the sex assigned at birth. Okay, some examples may include male, female, transgender, non-binary, or genderqueer, agender, and many others. We also talk about, there is also something called gender expression. Now, gender expression is how a person outwardly presents their gender, which can include behavior, clothing, and other characteristics. When we talk about sexual orientation, the definition is that sexual orientation describes the pattern, emotions, romantic, and/or sexual attraction a person experiences. Not dependent on gender identity is sexual orientation is independent of gender identity. So we have examples that will include heterosexual, attraction to the opposite gender, homosexual, attracted to the same gender, bisexual, attracted to two or more genders, pansexual, attraction to all genders, asexual is the lack of sexual attraction, and others. And we also have fluidity. That sexual orientation can be fluid for some individuals and can change over time. Now, what are some key differences? Let's talk about attraction versus identity. Now, sexuality is about who you are attracted to, while gender identify is about who you are. Not binary, both genders and sexuality exist on a spectrum, not as a simple binary. Socially constructed are while biological factors play a role, both gender and sexuality are also influenced by social and culture factors. So in essence, gender identity is about one's internal sense of self, while sexual orientation is about whom one is attracted to. These are two distinct aspects of a person's identity and can be both fluid and diverse. So, let's go over sexual orientation. A person's sexual identity or self-identification as bisexual, heterosexual, homosexual, pansexual, and etc. We have bisexual, and that is a person who is sexually attracted to people of any sex. Then you have heterosexual, a person who is sexually attracted to people of the opposite sex. Then you have heteronormative, the belief of assumption that heterosexually is normative or default sexual orientation for all people. It's important to view that heteronormative is something that is fairly new for me, that I am learning more about. Gay, lesbian, or queer person. That's an adjective to use to describe a person whose enduring physical, romantic, or emotional attractions are to people of the same sex. And then we have pansexual, a person who is not limited to biological sex, gender, or gender identity in sexual choice. And then we're going to talk about gender identity. Now, queer and trans organizations have been making the distinction between gender identity, gender, and presentation, expression, sex, and attraction for decades. Now, no one person or organization has created any one concept. So, we know that gender is the behavioral culture of psychological traits typically associated with one sex. We also have what's called agender. Agender literally means without a gender, and is a term used to refer to individuals who consider themselves gender neutral or who don't express a gender identity. Then we have androgynous, a gender expression that's ambiguous, incorporates a masculine and female characteristics. And then you have your cisgender or cis, and that is derived from a Latin word meaning on the same side. People whose gender identity or expression aligns with the sex assigned at birth. Okay. Then we have what we call, now a dead name is the birth of name of a person who has since changed their name. And that is especially if you're a transgender person. And we also have something called dead naming, when someone refers to a person who is transgender by their non-affirmed name. Now, dead naming is damaging to the individual and conveys disrespect for the person's identity, a lack of social support, invalidation, and potentially out the person and signal to others that they are transgender without their consent. Then we have gender binary, the idea that male-female are the only two genders and the individuals should be gendered either as a man or a woman. And we also have genderqueer. That's an umbrella term used to refer to a broad spectrum of non-binary gender identities. We also have gender transition. This is the process by which some people strive to be more closely aligned with their internal knowledge of gender, which is an outwards appearance. Some people socially transition whereby they might begin dressing, using names and pronouns, and be socially recognized using or recognized as other genders. other undergo physical transitions in which they modify their bodies. Then we have gender variant, and that's a term used to refer to individuals who don't conform to socially constructed dominant gender norms. We also have what we call intersex, and these are individuals who are born with any several variation in sex characteristics that can include chromosomes, gonads, sex hormones, or genitals. We have misgendering, and that's the act of acknowledging and or using a person's preferred and or requested gender pronoun. It also occurs when referring to someone through gender language which they do not identify. Okay. Examples are guys, ma'ams, miss, sir, and etc. Okay. Misgendering is disrespectful, psychological damaging, and can cause a great deal of anxiety for people who are subsequently put on an increased risk for discrimination. We have non-binary, and that's an umbrella term for all genders other than female, male, or woman, man, and it's used as an adjective. Alex is a non-binary person. Not all non-binary identity as trans are not trans people identify as non-binary. We also have gender expression. Now, that's the external appearance of one's gender identity, usually expressed through behavior, clothing, haircut, or voice. Gender expression may or may not conform to social or identify behaviors and characteristics typically associated with being masculine or feminine. Gender fluid refers to individuals whose gender identifies and fluctuates between all genders or a specific subset of genders. Gender identity is a person's innermost concept of self as male, female, a blend of both, or neither. It is how an individual perceives themselves, and they call themselves or ask to be called. Now, it is important to remember that one's gender identified can be the same or different from the sex assigned at birth. And we also have gender non-conforming, and this is another umbrella term used to describe the person who has not stereotypical societal expression and how they should look, act, based on the sex that they were assigned at birth. We also have, of course, trans woman, and that generally describes someone assigned male at birth who identifies as a woman. Sometimes trans women identify as male to female, also MTF or M2F or trans feminine. And also we have trans man. These are general describe someone assigned female at birth who identifies as man. Sometimes trans men identify as female to male, FTM, F2M, or trans masculine. And lastly, we have two-spirit, a term traditionally used by Native American people to refer to individuals who exhibit the identity and roles commonly associated with the opposite sex. So, there are key considerations that we have to always remember when it comes to our sexuality and our gender. And transgender encompasses many different gender presentations and identities. Gender is socially constructed. Certain body parts do not determine gender identity. Gender identity is about how we see ourselves. Trans people can identify as gay, straight, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, or etc. Gender expression is the external representation of one's gender identity. Sex gender identities and gender expressions are all malleable. The best way to be an ally is to listen to trans people themselves. Because language shapes reality, be careful with pronouns. Positive interaction between faculty and trans and gender nonconforming. And avoid using the term homosexual in identifying gay people, as the term is considered clinically outdated. A critical part of building and learning an environment is an inclusive of sexual orientation and gender identity is asking and correctly using someone's names and pronouns. Not only is it the best practice, it prevents someone from being or feeling, I should say, disrespected, invalidated, dismissed, alienated, dysphoric, or all of the above here. Lastly, I want to talk about briefly touch upon is a lot of people identify as fluid, and your sexuality is something that can change over time. And you don't have to stick with the label if you don't want to. And that's okay. There's a lot of people who just want to be themselves. They don't want to be put to a certain label, a certain sexuality, a certain gender. They just want to be them, and that's okay. But as always, we need to remember, we need to respect and love everyone, no matter what. Respect is the name of the game. I want to thank you for watching this video. And I will always, always support everyone. And especially our LGBTQIA+ community. So for now, I want to wish everybody a rest of Happy Pride Month and hope to see you on my next video. Peace out.